right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're very sorry about all the technical delays there that we had. We had to send out a new link this morning, and the link wasn't working for Christene. So we were trying to get her into the room to present. So we did want to welcome you today for the Canadian Landscape Standard, Defining Landscape Construction and Best Practices webinar. Today we have Christene, Stenhouse, Levette, and Darlene Myrie. And Christene works in the Green Associate and is a co-owner of Highland Landscapes for Lifestyle in Cape Breton, Nova Scotia, a family-owned landscape design build firm and a turf producer. She is the past president of Landscape Nova Scotia, past president of Canadian Nursery Landscape Association, the chair of the Canadian Landscape Standard, CSLA, CNLA Joint Committee, and co-chair of the CNLA Government Relations Committee. Darlene is a lighting design, OALA, CSLA, ASLA Associate IES, and currently works for Sustainable Transportation Coordinator for the City of Richmond Hill in Ontario. A member of the Canadian Landscape Standards, CNLA Joint Committee, Darlene is a landscape architect and lighting designer who has collaborated on a wide range of private and public realm projects. Before we do get started, I just wanted to let you know that Darlene and Christene will be answering questions that are asked throughout the presentation if they're directed to the specific slide. If not, you can hold your questions till the end and they will answer them in the Q&A section. If your screen freezes, please hit the reconnect button that is at the top. And at the end of this session, a link will be sent out to all attendees and posted online at our Hort Trades website. So for now, I will pass it over and we will get started.
Excellent. So the CLS is a national guideline which establishes the standard of landscape work across the country. So the second edition features a more modern cover, and this color theme carries throughout the document. Inside the second edition, you'll find that enhanced layout's been used for a better user experience. And for those of you who already had the first edition, you'll know this, but for those of you just joining us, this is a living document. The CLS committee will be circulating new and revised content regularly to ensure that the industry has access to the most up-to-date standards. The goal of the CLS committee is to have the National Landscape Standard on the desk of every professional across the country. Any individual or company that's involved with landscape products or services should have a working knowledge of the Canadian Landscape Standard.
Okay. So, oh, sorry, Darlene, is that still you?
That's you. Sorry, on slide 4. Okay,
perfect. So the great power of our value chain. So both associations have an amazing value chain, and the value chain in the Canadian Nursery Landscape Association is especially broad and deep. And when I say that, of course, the breadth of the value chain are the product lines, and the depth are the variety within the product lines. So we have an infographic here of our value chain. I'm just going to go towards my computer here. It's just easier. So you can see the various product and services across the value chain. We start in the design realm, the planning realm, the professionals, the landscape architects, the landscape designers, and the certified landscape designers, the arborists, the planners, the engineers, and it goes right through to the construction, the installation, design, build, into our landscape material suppliers, our nursery growers, our turf producers, our softscape suppliers, mulches, soils, our hardscape suppliers, pavers, natural stone, and all our specialties. Then we have all the equipment dealers, all the suppliers of our tools and our accessories. And then last but certainly not least is the plant healthcare aspect, the landscape performance, the landscape maintenance, the arboriculture, the integrated pest management. I'll go to the next slide.
Okay. So as key product and service providers in a world dealing with the real effects of climate change, The CLS is an essential resource for sustainable design, green infrastructure, and climate change mitigation and adaptation. Well-designed, installed, maintained, and managed green infrastructure must be part of the climate change adaptation solution. So green infrastructure are natural vegetative systems and green technologies that collectively provide society with a multitude of economic, environmental, and social benefits. This includes urban tree canopies, parklands, urban forests, woodlots. It includes watershed ecological elements such as wetlands, streams, lakes, and shorelines. It includes stormwater systems that incorporate sustainable natural assets, including bioswales, engineered wetlands, and stormwater ponds, permeable hardscape surfaces used in low-impact development, agricultural lands, grasslands and lawns, green roofs, living walls, and container plantings. So we feel that as stewards of the environment, using the CLS can help us to address some of today's challenges associated with environment and climate change. The use of best practices and standards helps avoid the common and often entrenched ways that contribute to landscape failures. We've all seen them in the course of our work, and the goal is to improve landscape performance. The CLS creates a baseline of good workmanship and standards in the industry.
Perfect. So, like to take you all through a little bit of a closer look at the Canadian Landscape Standard second edition. So we'll give you the highlights. And I wanted to start off by saying that in order to really understand, after this introduction, of course, how to best use the Canadian Landscape Standard in your business, you really have to read it cover to cover. And it's 256 pages. And if that seems daunting, War and Peace is 1,225 pages. So I'll take you through to the next slide. So as an industry tool, and this is one of the most valuable industry tools. And again, because the value chain is so broad and so deep, we have endeavored in this second edition to touch as many of those aspects at all possible. And as Darlene had said, it's a living document. So we always encourage feedback and comments and that sort of thing, but we'll talk about it towards the end of the presentation. So as an industry tool, so the Canadian Landscape Standard sets the guidelines for best practices in all major aspects of the landscape horticulture industry. So reference the Canadian Landscape Standard in your designs and all your tender packages. For example, I'm a landscape designer and we do predominantly design build in our firm. So in my title block of my landscape design, my drawings, I insert the Canadian Landscape Standard second edition logo. I insert that I'm a certified landscape designer. So all these logos are so important, but the Canadian Landscape Standard, in order to get it mainstreamed and, you know, what we would call branding, it should really appear in as many places as possible. So put it in all your project documents as well. So if you're getting your project documents pre-printed, a lot of us have proposals or worksheets that we send to the printer, include the Canadian Landscape Standard second edition logo. All your communications, it sort of tells everybody that you work to a best practices, you work to a national guideline, and it speaks to professional accountability. A competitive advantage. We'll talk about specifications a little later in the presentation, but the Canadian Landscape Standard is embedded in many specifications. And so that gives you a bit of a competitive advantage when you use it. So referenced industry credentials, and this is very, very important. So in the first standard, we had the suggested or recommended professional credentials in each section. And we found that problematic in the sense that it was almost invariably you were going to leave somebody out. You were going to leave some specific professional credential or a trade credential or a degree or some kind of specialty we were going to leave out. So what we did is we took the recommended professional credentials, and we put them into, I'm just going to see here now, we put them into its own section in contract administration. So that would be section 2. Actually, I'll tell you, I wrote it down. It's section 2.1.12, qualified professionals. So in that list, you will be able to see all the recommended professionals.
Okay, so as Christine was saying, we want to see this document referenced in multiple documents that you're sending out of your office. So that way it works to then allow us to use this tool more appropriately to improve landscape performance. So the CLS sections align with the Canadian National Master Construction Specification sections, and that includes all those listed here. And this makes it easy to reference the appropriate CLS section within your specifications.
Jeez, sorry about that. Here we go. So, new content and sources and resources.
Your
Sorry, Christine,
sound's
your
off again
audio-
there, Christine.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, it's just the audio is a bit fuzzy again.
Okay, all right. I'll try to get a little bit closer. Okay, so going over the new content sources and resources, and again, the second edition, any second edition is always meant to be an improvement on the first edition. So we have included in this edition the Interlocking Concrete Paver Institute Hardscape Standard. So what we did is we took that section 12 and we had Rob Bowers, who is in charge of, he's the director of engineering for ICPI.
Sorry to interrupt, Christine. It's still very faint. There's like kind of like a fan, or I don't know if there's a fan or something going in the background.
Okay, is that better?
That's much better. Yeah.
Okay, I'm just going to hold my phone. I am sorry.
That's better.
A technological nightmare today. This is not normal, but there you have it. Okay, so I'm going to hold my phone and I'm going to carry on. So the new content, so the Interlocking Concrete Paver Institute. So in section 12, again, that was reviewed by Rob Bowers, and that is reflected in section 12. We've also taken the opportunity in section 2 to align with the ICPI professional credentials. So he reviewed that list as well and dropped in all the credentials that he thought were relevant for our industry. Number 2, the invasive species and the National Voluntary Code of Conduct for the ornamental horticulture industry. And that's pretty exciting. So that document, which was released earlier or late last year, is a collaboration between the Canadian Council on Invasive Species, the Canadian Society of Landscape Architects, and the CNLA. Then we have the Ontario Landscape Tree Planting Guide, which we're all very excited about. Darby McGrath was the lead on that project, and that is referenced throughout the Canadian Landscape Standard Second Edition. The Snow and Ice Risk Management Guidelines, you will see that reference. In particular, you're going to see that in Section 9 Landscape. You're going to see it in Contract Administration. You're going to see it in the Insurance section. And the cold climate factors as well. You're going to see the cold climate factors referenced through plants and planting and in landscape maintenance. And the cold climate factors came to us with, we reached out to the Northwest Territories Association of Landscape Architects, and a gal named Margaret Ferguson headed up the eyes on that and the review on adding the cold climate factors, because as we know, cold climate factors affect plant performance, plant selection, and design. And lastly, we have added landscape commissioning. So there is the landscape commissioning plan checklist is in the second edition as an appendix. And you will also see further explanation to that in section 2 as well as the Section 9 landscape maintenance. So highlights of the table of contents. First of all, we have, I'm just going to bring my document up here for 1 second here so I don't miss anything. So the table of contents. We have the acknowledgement, and of course, that acknowledgement speaks directly to the contribution from the British Columbia Association. So that is the BCLNA and the BCSLA. And of course, the commitment of all our volunteers and our subject matter experts who contributed to this standard. Secondly, we have the climate change piece. And I wanted to just talk to you a little bit about that. So the climate change piece is a piece that was co-written by the Canadian Society of Landscape Architects and the CNLA. It includes basically a position statement on climate change and how important the landscape performances and best practices and guidelines are to adaptation, mitigation, resilience, and all those principles that the landscape industry can contribute towards that. The final paragraph here, I'd like to read to you actually, just to sort of punch what we're trying to say in this. The natural assets and built green assets together provide the support necessary for sustaining the quality of air, water, and soil in urban cities, suburban neighborhoods, and rural communities. The Canadian Landscape Standard provides needed tools and resources to guide you, the owner, the designer, the contractor, or the maintenance contractor, in your efforts to create sustainable, resilient, and performing landscapes. So this particular section also goes through terms that you should know, which includes living green infrastructure. There's a definition, as well as a list of common green infrastructure components. And as well, there's a statement on landscape commissioning, and there's additional resources which include landscape performance metrics, the life cycle cost analysis of stormwater management methods that was produced by the Landscape Canada Committee a few years ago. The Canadian Society of Landscape Architects resource for climate adaptation page is an amazing resource. And the CNLA Extreme Weather, Water, and Climate Change webinar is also available on their site. So then we go through the various sections of, let me just get this up there, the table of contents. So what I wanted to highlight for you was the commonalities in each section include sort of a purpose and intent, and then we go into the references, specifications, and sources that would be important for that particular section. You'll find a few of the sections vastly have changed, and some are still, there's room for improvement, and the Canadian Landscape Standard Committee will be heading right into revisions and amendments as soon as we get through this. So what I do want to highlight for you is in the appendices, you will find an Appendix A, tables and figures. From section 3, 4, 5, like right through to the last section, there's a really valuable list of the tables that are in there that are very useful. So I would encourage you to maybe print that list off and have it next to you when you're reading the standard so that you can highlight what's useful for you. Okay. Okay, so at the also the appendices are very, very important to outline. So we have, I just spoke about the tables and figures. We have the Appendix B, which is the basic contents of a landscape commissioning plan. Appendix C, of course, is our Canadian Nursery Stock Standard. And Appendix D is the National Voluntary Code of Conduct for the Ornamental horticulture industry. And then, of course, we have a revamped glossary of terms and definitions. So getting this standard out there, this is so important. We consider, we have a term that we call first contact. So let's start with the landscape architects and designers and the design build contractors. You are a group in our industry that has first contact with clients. So you have a unique opportunity to affect their choices, their, how their project rolls out, and what standard that they would want to be designed and built to. So as Darlene had said before, and as I've also said, it's very, very important for our architects, our landscape architects, and our designers to ensure that the Canadian Landscape Standard is referenced, and whether that's verbal or to be included in your drawings, both would actually be ideal. The retailers are also a sector group that we identify, again, as first contractors or first contacts. You have a tremendous opportunity to influence the consumer. So whether that whether that is product selection or best practices, whether you wanted to take excerpts from the landscape standard and do how-to materials for your clients and customers, you should definitely have a hard copy on your when your clients check out. So again, it can be a counter copy of the Canadian Landscape Standard in your office of your landscape offices, your design offices. So there's whatever opportunity, I guess I could rattle on, but whatever opportunity that you have as a landscape business, a retail garden center, a grower, your landscape architect firms, your government offices, wherever you have an opportunity to showcase and use and communicate the value of the landscape standard, that is ideal for really getting it out there and mainstreaming it. It cannot be done with promotion alone. We almost have to mobilize an army to get this mainstreamed. Okay.
So all members of the CNLA and the CSLA, including students, will receive a digital subscription as a member benefit. The CLS is available in both English and French, just as with the first edition. And the digital copy is copyright protected, and it's locked to editing and sharing, but you will be able to print the document. Members can purchase the hard copy at a discounted price of $150 plus shipping fees. And additions, revisions, and amendments will be issued to subscribers as they're developed. So we just want to ensure that everything is fluid, and we're providing the information as changes are met in the industry. We'd like to see all members adopting and incorporating the standard into their work as much as they can. We've reiterated this many times throughout this message, but for example, as this testimonial received by Daniel Glenn shows how it might be used, he stated that interpretation of drawings and technical specifications can be subject to divergent understanding. The CLS sets a universal bar in terms of minimal expectations and helps bridge any gaps in communicating the intent. Our office has adopted the CLS as an integral component of our technical references for both construction detailing and as a valuable addition to the National Master Specification and Municipal Standards. So the CSLA office is currently working on an endorsement list and will use that list to promote the standard further. And then I'm going on to the next slide. And just to let you know a bit more about the history, for those of you who aren't aware, the British Columbia Landscape Standard was in its 8th edition in 2012, when the Canadian Society of Landscape Architects and the Canadian Nursery Landscape Association approached the BCSLA and the BCLNA to ask whether the BC Landscape Standard could serve as the basis for a national standard. because we felt that document was so key to moving forward. To the many, many people who have since collaborated and participated in meetings and discussions to build this into an excellent reference document that has formed the basis of the Canadian Landscape Standard, the industry owes you a debt of gratitude. Many volunteers and subject matter experts participated in order to ensure that this national standard is relevant and applicable to all regions of Canada and contributes to strengthening our industry as a whole.
Thank you, Darlene. So as we said in the climate change page at the introduction of the Canadian Landscape Standard 2nd edition, it is the landscape horticulture industry's time as we position as key product and service providers in a world dealing with the real effects of climate change. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank all of those who have contributed to the production of this valuable landscape horticulture industry tool. Use this collective effort. It's your national landscape standard. Use it to make a difference on the ground. Now, as I said before, we are always looking for comments, suggestions for inclusions, improvements, something missing. It's funny because I was going through it this morning and I found a typo, and we've had eyes on this document for so long and you always miss something. So do not be afraid to send a comment along. And for the CNLA membership, certainly contact your provincial association ED with anything that you'd like to say. And for the Canadian Society of Landscape Architects, call Michelle Legault. She is your executive director, and she can pass along any comments. So, as Darlene had said, it's a member benefit. So you have free digital download if you're a member of either the CNLA or the CSLA. And that link went out to everybody by email the day we launched. Now, if by any chance you haven't gotten your link, you can contact the coordinator at the CSLA. So that is coordinator at CSLA-AAPC.ca, and she will see that you get your link. Now, for those of you on the call that are non-members, the non-member pricing is as follows. The digital download is $100. The 5 digital download license is $400. The hard copy binder is $250 plus shipping. The combo digital and hard copy is $300 plus shipping. And the student digital download is discounted 50% because we really encourage the students on the ground to be using this. That is $50. So that concludes our rather strange presentation today. My apologies for all the technical difficulties on my end. Not sure what happened. Yesterday's run through went smooth as silk, but I'll hand it over to Carrie now. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, everyone. So on behalf of Landscape Ontario, we'd like to thank you, Christine and Darlene, for joining us today. A reminder that we will have the replay sent out with the links and the PowerPoint. But if you do have any questions right now, please feel free to enter them into the comment section, and Christine and Darlene will get them, have your questions answered. So I know Michelle has been, there were a few questions that have been answered, and Michelle's been on it and answering them right away. So let me just go, there was, yeah, and actually she's answered all of the questions that have been on there. So one of them was about the logo. We'll also share the link that Michelle shared in the chat with everybody in the email. The guidelines, yep. So Michelle answered that one as well. So again, if there are any questions, feel free to include them in the chat. Or if you do have any other questions, we can direct you to actually Michelle had given the executive director at CSLA-AAPC.ca. So, and she will direct them to the appropriate person as well. So anyways, I guess we will wrap that up for now. And again, we will thank you everybody for joining us. And if you want to find out about more of our opportunities that we have for any of our online seminars and webinars, please visit horttrades.com. Thanks so much, everyone, and have a fantastic day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.